Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Frank Zacarri, and this is Life Altering Events. Now, we're going to start this show off giving you an update on where my latest book is. All right, shameless self-promotion. It's the sixth book. It's called The Secret to Walking on Water is to Know Where the Rocks Are. Now, we finished the second round of editing, so that's good. And I don't know how much longer it's going to be in the editing process, but this is a guide for every entrepreneur, anyone who runs an organization. And as you're going to see throughout this guide, it's not about success doesn't come from working harder or working smarter. It's not necessarily what you know that's going to make you successful. It's more about what you don't know that'll make you succeed or fail. What you know is not nearly as important as who you know. Hence the reason Sarah's here today. Too many people sink. Too many organizations sink because they don't know where the rocks are. And this guide will help to prepare you for what you don't know. Now, ladies and gentlemen, since the financial meltdown in 2008, and now with our current COVID situation, more and more people are starting or thinking of starting their own business as a solopreneur. Okay, solopreneur. We never heard that term until just a few years ago. So what is this? Most of the people feel, I have a pretty good idea. I'm pretty smart at what I do. I'm going to try and go out and do it on my own. I'm pretty good at something, so I'm going to become a coach or a mentor. It sounds great. Most times we find out it's way more difficult than we even imagined. How do we create a presence? How do you tell your story? Where do you tell your story? Do I use social media? If so, which one? How do I differentiate myself from the thousands of other people who are trying to make the same decision at the same time? Well, my guest today, Sarah Lawrence, has been helping people navigate through this swamp of moving from corporate world to the self-employment world since 2010. That's a long time. And she's been doing this. Let me tell you something about Sarah. She's an award-winning speaker. She's a writer, and she's an organizer, and God, I hope I pronounce this right, for the Tedx Teneo Paseo, correct? Did I get it correct?
Teneo Paseo, but yes, close enough.
Okay, for the Tedx program. Now, her passion is being a momentum maker for those who want to make a massive change in the world, and they have a message that needs to be heard. Now, Sarah is a speaking coach for TEDx speakers, and she and other experts or other people in the expert industry. Now, we're going to talk about the expert industry in a little bit here. Now, Sarah's life purpose is to become a force for those who want to show up in the world in a big way and make a massive and positive impact on the world. So, Sarah, welcome to Life Altering Events.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
So am I. This is going to be a really interesting show, people, ladies and gentlemen. Sarah, share with us the journey that led you, to where you are now, where you were born, where you went to school, how you got to where you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. So I was born and raised in Las Vegas, which, when I was little and I used to say that, people would be like, do you live in hotels? Like, what's it like, right? It's such a funny thing because Vegas is like any other major metropolitan city, and especially when you get into the suburbs, it's really not that different from anywhere else in the world. There's like one street that's all fancy and neon, maybe two, honestly, but beyond that, it's just another town. And so as I was going through my life here, I never really saw a difference between where I lived and where anyone else lived because I had a pretty normal life. I'm an only child. My parents were married for 32 years before my father died in 2013. And, it was pretty average. I went to school here. I went to public school. My parents were very traditional. My father was a cement mason and my mother was a hairdresser. And the basic foundation for everything that they raised me on was that you show up to work and you work really hard. You work lots of hours a week and you put in the effort and you go up, maybe not the corporate ladder because neither one of them was corporate, but people will recognize what you do that's good, and then you'll get promotions and you'll get raises, and that's like the American dream, right? Because that was their generation. And the reality is that I, from a very young age, had things that I loved, that I was good at, and that I was passionate about. But I was never communicated to that you can actually make a living with the things that you love. Like, you can show up in the world and you don't have to be like a doctor or a lawyer or an accountant. You don't have to be any of these things. You can like have a love and a passion and make money from it. Right? Like, nobody ever shared that with me. And so I went through school. I was in gifted programs. I was a straight A student. I was everything that everybody expected of me. Like, I was this perfect kid. And then when I turned 16, I started to learn how to drive. And it was around that time that like I started to have what I recognize now as panic attacks. But at the time, I didn't know what they were. And I would get overloaded really easily. I couldn't keep track of things, like where I was really strong when I was little. Suddenly, like, math didn't make sense to me, and I couldn't manage my time properly. And like all of these things started happening. And I was like, how? Like, what's going on? And then I was driving home, and my mom was always very protective of me because I was an only child. She had me when she was 36, so she was a little bit older. And so my mom was always very, very conscious, and we lived in Las Vegas, right? And I was a girl. So like very conscious of where I was, what time I was getting home, who I was with, all of those things, right? That a good parent should be doing. And I was driving home and I had hit traffic and I was like 3 minutes late. And I was probably 4 or 5 minutes away from home. And my mom started calling my phone, right? And I had a cell phone, but like, it was like the big ones, like the giant ones, right?
I remember those.
And yes, and like it's safe. So it's not in my purse or anything. It's literally sitting on the passenger seat of my car. And the phone starts going off and ringing, and I can't answer it because I'm driving, right? And I'm very conscious of like safety, and I can't answer it. And my mom doesn't stop calling me. And of course she's worried about me. And I remember having this complete breakdown. I grab the phone and I throw it as hard as I can onto the car floor. Like, and I'm like the ringing, it was like that thing that pushed me over the edge. Right. And I start crying and my heart is beating and I'm like, what is even happening to me right now? Like, this is not that big of a deal. So I get home and I am hysterical and my mom doesn't understand what happened. And like, there's all of this conflict. Right. And this is the first time that I remember having a complete full-blown panic attack, and where I start to recognize that something is changing mentally for me, that like I need to adapt and adjust, right? And it takes me a really long time to recognize this and get like a grip. From this point forward, everything that like I kind of saw as perfect, that my parents saw as perfect, starts to fall apart. I stopped wanting to go to school. I stopped showing up to classes, honestly. Like, I would rather be anywhere but there. I could sit in a class and just absorb information. And I was like, why would I do homework? Like, why would I can just be there. And I know that like everything started to kind of fall apart. I ended up graduating, but my drive to want to show up in that way disappears, right? And I have no idea what I'm going to do with my life. Like, nothing inspires me. I'm still having panic attacks. I don't really want to get out of bed. The thing about anxiety is it runs right next to depression, right? Yes. Like, if you have one, you generally have the other. Yes. And I vary from being like, okay, I'm functioning, but like I'm shaky, to just wanting to be in bed and not doing anything. And it takes me basically all of my 20s to get a grip on it. It takes me an entire decade to recognize it and say, okay, this is what I do. Now, how do I fix this, right? How do I live with this? And this is the first topic that I ever take on. Like, how do I go up and how do I show up in the world as a speaker, which we're going to talk about that in a second. Yeah. But it takes about a decade for me to go, how do I learn to live with this? How do I, right? And so now I'm trying to figure this out. I still don't know what I'm going to do with my life, right? Like, I'm kind of floundering. Like, I'm like in my 20s, like I'm an adult and I don't know how to adult, like, at all. And, you know, my parents are there, they're super supportive, but they don't understand what I'm going through. And it's just this ongoing, like, I can't manage to get my life together for a decade. And then at some point, I remember reading an article online, And it was talking about anxiety and things that other people were using to manage it. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, I know it's hard. I know other people struggle, but what is actually happening to me? Like, what is causing like these triggers? So I spend a period of time literally reverse engineering my behavior. Like, what is causing me to not want to get out of bed? Like, what is causing these panic attacks? What is my trigger? Why am I triggered? Like, what happened that made this my trigger? Right? So now I'm reverse engineering my behaviors. I'm seeing doctors. I am talking to everyone I can. At one point, I had a doctor tell me that I was having anxiety because I wasn't sleeping, which was a whole separate thing. And I was like, really? No. So I spend all of my 20s figuring this out. I reverse engineer everything. I'm finally in a place where I'm like, I got this. Like, I have my brain under control, right? And then I'm like, all right, good. I'm here. Now what? Now I have to figure out what I'm going to do with my life. I still don't know it. Like 28, I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And I realize as I'm going through all of this and I'm really working on introspection, I realized that the one thing in life that I was good at, the one thing that I loved more than anything was speaking. I was in speech and debate in high school. I got on stages as often as I could. Like, anywhere where there was a stage, I would like look for it and I would hunt it out and I would be there and I would do whatever it took, right? And so I'm like, okay, but speaking is a tool, right? Like, what am I going to do with that? Just because I love it doesn't mean like there's anything to do with it. And so I played with this for a while. And then I was like, you know what? There's major people out there like Tony Robbins, Mel Robbins, like there's major people out there who have leveraged this to become successful, right? So I'm like, okay, I have a tool that I know I can do, and I need to figure out how to leverage it. And I don't know how I'm going to get there. This is the beginning of my, like, it's so funny that your book is like, look for the rocks, because this is literally how I describe it to everyone. You literally take the first step and there's all this fog, right? And you have no idea where that rock is. There's all this fog that you can't see through, but you take the first step and then like the fog opens up just enough for you to take that second step, and then opens up just enough for you to take the next step, right?
Yes.
And so I took this first step and I started reaching out to speaking coaches in Las Vegas. I joined Toastmasters, which squirrel moment, but I will be a Toastmaster for my entire life. Like, I will never not be a member of Toastmasters because it set the foundation for everything else I did. So I reached out to speaking coaches. I joined Toastmasters. I started networking in a very non-traditional way, which means I didn't go to networking events because that was anxiety inducing.
Yes.
But I started like asking people, hey, who do you know that I could talk to? Hey, this or that. I literally just talked to people. And one of the first speaking coaches that I reached out to, he offered me some free tickets to an event. And the event was in San Diego. Now, I have to tell you, at this point in my life, financially, I was a mess. Like, I didn't know how to manage money. I was broke. I was lucky that like I could figure out how to pay bills, right? Like, I just never had these life skills. And so now I have this free ticket to this event that I really want to go to, that I'm positive is going to be integral to my future, right? And I just know I have to get there. So my husband at the time was like, I will support you anytime, anything you want to do. I have an amazing network of friends and family. Like, if I leave, I know I'm covered, but I have to come up with money for the hotel. I have to come up with money for gas. I have to come up with money for food. So it still is costing me money, right? So I sit down and I'm like, how can I do this? How can I make this work? I just know I have to be there. Like, there's something in my soul that is like, just go, right? So I figure it out and I go to this event. And I am so excited and I have such high standards. And this was my first event into the industry, right? And I am positive that it is going to change my life. I go to day one and it is terrible. Like, have you ever been to an event where it literally, like, I cannot get this time back in my life?
Yes.
Like, I will never get this time back again.
I think we've all been there, Sarah.
Right. That's what this event was for me, like on day one. Right. And I am devastated. I am like, I cannot believe that I just spent this money. Like, my family needed it. I have this mom guilt. Like, I am just like devastated. Right. But I'm already there. And even though I considered going home, I was like, you know what? I'm already here. I've already spent the money. What worst case scenario? I get a weekend like away. Fine. I'm already here. I've already sacrificed. Right. So day 2 comes and I'm already not feeling good. Like I'm already like, whatever. So we get through lunch and we're sitting in the room and I'm sitting in my chair and I'm half paying attention and half like, writing or thinking or brainstorming. And the host gets up on stage and she introduces one of the speakers. So sorry. She introduces one of the speakers. And the first thing out of her mouth is for the next 90 minutes. And my first thought is, oh my gosh, who's talking for 90 minutes? Like, what? I have to listen to someone for 90 minutes? Do you know what I could do in 90 minutes? I could go get a nap. Like, what? Right. My mind is just blown. Like I cannot even comprehend a 90-minute presentation.
Exactly.
And so the speaker comes up on stage and he starts talking and it is like slow motion. My entire world slows down. Like my attention goes up on stage. It was like magic. And you'll hear me use the term magic a lot. And it's something that I definitely like believe in. Like there is something in the universe, there's something in our energy that it's magic, right? He starts talking and I'm like, what just happened? Like I went from like sad and like disappointed and like all this guilt to like, I am with you 100%. And then I think to myself, I don't know how I'm going to get here. I don't know like what's going to get me to this spot, but I know that this is the energy I need to live in. Like I want to be on stage. I want to be giving the 90-minute presentations. I want to be here. Right. So that speaker was a Mana guy who later becomes my friend, my mentor. I work with him in all of his companies now. We have a nonprofit. I work with him in the nonprofit. Right. And it all started from this event. And while he was speaking, I was a crazy person. I was taking pictures of his slides. I was taking notes. I was doing all the things, right? And he offers his program, his signature program. And it was not expensive. Like he offered a payment plan and it was not expensive. And I was like, I need this program, but I can't afford it. But I need this program, but I can't afford it, right? And that conflict of like, how do I move forward without money? And I have always believed that when you hit a wall, you have a choice. You either find a way around that wall or you sit there and you give up, right? And I hit that wall hard. I was like, I don't even know what I'm going to do now. Like, and it really took me a little bit of time. I was taking pictures. I was taking notes. I knew I couldn't do it. So that night, I don't talk to him on that day or that event. Can we just be clear? I wasn't going to be like, now my anxiety is really high. I'm like, I can't just talk to this person, right? So I go back to my room and I'm really thinking it over. I go into day 3 of the event, which again was not awesome. And I'm driving home and all I can think about is this presentation and how I need to be in this energy and how I want to be that person, right? It was extraordinary. And I go home and I get home and I friend request him on Facebook and he accepts my friend request. And then I don't talk to him because I like, don't know what to say. Like, I don't even know where to begin, right? Like clearly you have a multi-million-dollar business, like you know what you're doing and I like have nothing happening for me. And so he's on my Facebook for almost a year. And during that year, I'm working on my speaking skills. I'm getting smaller stages. I'm showing up where I can. I'm working on how do you get booked. I'm learning these skills on my own, right? I also launched a business off to the side that's outside of this expert industry. I actually launched a swim school because I need to find a way to make money while I'm doing this, right? And I was really good at swimming too. So like, I do all the things. And so I launched a business. So I learned a little bit about business, like just on my own, like what it takes, how to manage money, all of that. So I'm doing these skills on my own. And about 9 to 10 months after all of this is happening, Aman posts on Facebook looking for an executive assistant, right? And I see the post and I remember looking at it thinking, I don't know anything. Like, I don't know any of these things. He like wanted copywriting and he wanted marketing skills. And I didn't even know what a copy was. And I'm not kidding. Like I had no idea what an email copy was. So I remember looking at this ad and I just stared at it for like 15 minutes. I was literally in bed, like in like a blanket burrito, staring at this ad. And I was like, you know what? Like, here's the thing is if I apply and I don't get hired, what do I lose? Nothing. I don't have the job now. I won't have the job then. Look, I'm at zero, like nothing. Right. And so I apply. And I have no expectations of getting hired, right? And I meet with Amon, and he does a match interview, and I meet with some team members. He ends up coming to Vegas because they had some other event here, and I meet him in person. We have lunch, and I remember eating lunch with him and just thinking how extraordinary this was. Like, how did I get here? Like, this is the guy I saw on stage a year ago. Like, how did I get here, right? And we left, and I remember shaking his hand saying, I'll talk to you again. Like, there was this weird moment where I was just sure. And I went through some other tasks, and there was a whole bunch. His interview process is very, very specific and detailed and in depth. And it took about 2 months, the entire interview process. And then I got hired. Right. And I was like, wow, cool. Like, I was so shocked. I didn't even know. Now I'm hired, and I'm sure I'm going to get fired. Like, I'm positive. Like, somehow I have fooled these people into thinking I'm capable of this. Right. And so we show up, and I do my onboarding, and he gets on a Zoom call with me because he's in Canada and I'm still in Vegas. And he gets on a Zoom call with me. And the first task ever, he gives me copy. Right. It's actually a student's copy for her signature course. And he gives me copy, and he says, I want you to rewrite this. And I'm like, I don't even know what copy is. Where does this go? Who do you email it to? I have so many questions. Right. And I was like, I don't know how to, I didn't say I didn't know how to do this, but he knew I didn't know how to do it. Right. And he's like, it's fine. Just write what you can. And like, we'll talk about it. So for the next 3 weeks, he shows up on a Zoom call with me every single day. Every single day we look at this copy. Every single day I get off the call with him, and I'm on tears because I'm sure I'm going to get fired, right? Like, this is like my day every day for 3 weeks, but every day he shows up for me, and he teaches me something new about copy, and he teaches me something new about marketing, right? And then there was an event, right? Now I'm his executive assistant, and I need to show up. So he flies me out to Canada for this event. And it's the first time I meet our higher end students. It's the first time that I'm actually present inside the industry, right? And I'm so excited. And I'm like trying not to be awkward and weird, because that's kind of who I am, right? And I'm trying not to be like clumsy and all these things. So I show up. And the first day of the first event, right, I am like business casual. Everyone's showing up in like t-shirts and whatever, because that's Amon's style, right? Like, he has I'm a leader t-shirt, and I'm like business casual, and I'm trying to be like professional and like all of these things, right? Like this is what I'm taught when I'm little. Like, you show up as perfect as you can. And so he turns to me, and he's like, hey, Sarah, could you get some chairs and put them around the table? And I'm like, yes, absolutely. I can do that. Right. So I walk over to the pile of chairs, and I go to take a chair off the pile, and it slips out of my hand and hits me in the face. Right. Like, first day, first event, first 2 hours, like out of the gate, I am a liability, right? So now I've just spent 3 weeks on copy that I don't know how to write, and I've managed to injure myself, right? So Mon had actually left the room. One of the team members was on her computer. She looks up at me, and she's like, how? And then she like goes right back to work. Like, she can't even like believe what just happened, right? So my eye swells up, and it turns into this complete black eye. Like, I mean, like dark and black. And it looks like I've just now been beat up, right? So Amon walks back in, and he looks at me, and he's like, how? And I'm like, I hit myself in the face with a chair. And he's like, but how? But he has to go teach now. So we don't have time to get the whole story. So now I'm sitting here with this black eye. I'm embarrassed. I'm like, oh, like, how do I get myself in these situations? And the whole time Amon's looking at me, and he's like, he needs to teach, but he wants to know how this happened, but he needs to teach, right? And at lunchtime, I finally explained what happened. And he's like, okay, here's the deal. You're not allowed to touch anything sharp. Like, you cannot, like, we have to keep you away from anything that could injure you, right? And I'm like, yeah, right? And so that happens, the very first event, and I don't get fired, obviously, and things are okay. And it becomes an ongoing joke, and I bond with the team, and things are like magical. Like, I can't even tell you how this sets off a course of events for me. How that event in San Diego where I was miserable, where I saw him on, then I Facebook friended him, then I applied at a job I was not qualified for, but he believed in me, right? And then I go to this event and my awkwardness comes out immediately and no one says anything except like, all right, like that's where we are now. And that night, actually, Aman and I put together a mastermind, and it's all based around inspirational speaking. He wanted to launch it. It came about very serendipitously after I came on to the team. All these things seem to line up in the universe, right? So him and I create this mastermind, and we launch it for the company. And I went through the mastermind as a student and as a team member, and it was called Inspirational Speakers Masterclass. And Aman is a Tedx speaker as well. And in this very short period of time, he showed up as my mentor. He showed up as my friend. We built this mastermind. It was phenomenal. It is actually evolved into now a different mastermind. We added some elements, we got feedback, all of that. And every day going forward that I learned a little bit more and took that step into the fog a little bit more, it just was like the fog kept opening it up and opening up and opening up. And then one day, while I'm still getting on stages and I'm working for Aman and I'm doing all of these things, right? Like I'm still showing up in the world in a speaker way because that's who I want to be. And one day Aman calls me and he's like, yeah, so what are you doing with your life? And I was like, I don't even know what I'm doing tomorrow. Like, what? And he's like, yeah, so because this is your love and your passion, like, why aren't you considering Tedx? And I was like, I don't know. Like I needed to think bigger. And that's what he was showing me. Like you show up in the world bigger, right? You think bigger, you dream big. And he was like, if you have your choice, right? In any, like, if you can't fail in any scenario, do you want to be a speaker or an organizer? And I was like, organizer. Like I didn't even have to think about it. Like I was like, organizer, right? If I have a way, if I have a platform to get speakers on a stage and let them share their message in the world, why wouldn't I do that? And he was like, great, go apply. Like, and I was like, oh, all right. Like that's a thing I can do. And so I pull up the Tedx application and I look at it and I think to myself, this can't possibly be this hard. Like it can't. Look at the questions. They're so easy. This can't possibly be this hard. Spoiler, it is actually that hard. They're very simple questions, but Ted wants very specific answers and they're looking for very specific things. So I fill out the application and I get denied my first time around. And it was like hard and fast denial, right? And I am devastated. I am just like, I don't know what to do, right? And I kind of sit in the sadness for a little while. I actually don't tell him on out of the gate. And I finally tell him, he's like, I don't know what you're upset about. Just call Roger Killen, who is the organizer of Tedx Stanley Park, which is the biggest Tedx. At their peak, they had 2,700 people in the audience, right? So Aman just goes, yeah, just call up Roger and have him walk you through it. And I'm like, just call up Roger? Like every point I am like, I don't know what to do. Like, I'm just like this person who's just like, these are things we do. Like we can just call people and be like, can you help me? Right? I cannot wrap my brain around this idea of using your community to build your business, right? So I call up Roger and I'm scared and I'm nervous and I don't like talking on the phone to begin with, right? Because of my anxiety. And I call up Roger and I'm like, look, Tedx rejected me. I really need help. I need help on my bigger vision. Like, I know I want to do this, but I don't know how. And he was like, yeah, no problem. Let's talk. Like, super nice guy, right? And him and I spend a lot of time on the phone talking about why I want to do it, what my vision for it is, how that falls under the Tedx brand. Is my vision in alignment with Tedx, right? All of these things. And I put in my application again. And this time I get accepted as a license holder, right? That connection made the difference for me. So you'll hear me talk about it a lot. Like you said, it's not about what you know, it's about what you don't know and who you know. And everything I have done has exemplified that, right? It was my connection with Roger. And then he was the one who gave me the information and helped me finish to become the license holder for Tedx Tenea Paseo. So now I have this amazing stage that I'm so excited to be able to provide this platform. I'm getting on stages. I'm talking about things I love. I work with someone who I adore, who our energy is just like perfect, right? I eventually become, I say eventually, but it was actually only like 6 months into me working with Amon. I become operations manager for his main company, which is Success Road Academy. I now work with him in every single company that he owns. We work together in a nonprofit as well. He works with me in my projects. So we're very interwoven now. And I'll tell you that him being my mentor and my friend is the thing that's made all the difference in the connections, right? Like if you don't know this information, who do you know that knows this information? That is everything. So that's how we got here. And so I don't really want to go much else. I want to see if there's any questions or anything, like, because that was a lot.
Sure. Now we've all watched dozens of TEDx talks, dozens. So what does it take to become a TEDx speaker? Going through what you just went through, is that the process?
So that was the process to be a TEDx organizer. So I get that question a lot. Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you want to be a TEDx speaker, what does it take? And everybody asks me this. And I will tell you that the first and foremost thing is you need to know what your talk is going to be about, what your topic is. And while you're discovering that, you need to be developing relationships with the TEDx community and organizers. These things need to happen at the same time. Because at any given point, you may get a TEDx stage. Now, I tell everybody, give yourself a year to prepare to be on that stage. It really takes a year to develop a TEDx talk at that level. But here's the thing, is if you're developing relationships with organizers, you're looking for TEDx stages, you're doing all of these things, at the same time you're developing your talk, you're really ahead of the game, right? Mm-hmm. So you go to TED.com, you search for TEDx's in whatever area you feel like you can travel to or in your area or whatever. Then you reach out to organizers. Now, here is the thing. If you send an organizer like 20 paragraph email about how amazing you are, they're not going to read it. And I say that from experience. I get through about 4 sentences before I stop reading an email, right? And every organizer and everyone in this industry says the same exact thing. Like, don't. Just don't. Here's how you get through to organizers. You say, hey, I saw that you're organizing this TEDx event. I'm really interested in being on your stage. I talk about this. How can I support you in this event? Right? That's all you say. Now, the organizer will either A, not get back to you because they are filled or whatever their time. They're going to get back to you and say, this is the support I need. Do you know anyone? Or they're going to book a call. I always book a call. Now, that doesn't mean the connection is going to work. It doesn't mean there's synergy, but I need to be on a call with someone to understand that, right? Mm-hmm. But I promise you, you're going to get a response that's 10 times more likely if you do that than if you send them 20 paragraphs on why you're awesome. And so I always say that, reach out to the organizer. This is my topic. How can I support you during your event?
Outstanding.
Yeah.
That's outstanding. I have another question for you, Sarah. Now, we've us in the lay people world, we've heard that there are TED Talks and there are TEDx Talks. Is there a difference? There
is. So TEDx is independently organized events. You have to be a license holder from TED to put on a TEDx event. TED events are put on by TED, the organization. TEDx events are events that are individually organized by organizers that hold a license from TED.
I see. So there were there because I've heard people use them interchangeably, and we never knew how does that actually work. Okay, so when you're putting together, you've got a program coming up very soon here in Las Vegas, right? Mm-hmm. What goes into organizing that? How do you get the speakers, and who pays for the time, and all the logistical stuff? How's that done?
So this varies from organizer to organizer. Once you have the license, as long as you're following the guidelines that come under TED, a lot of it is up to you as an organizer. So that means your theme is up to you. Your logistics is up to you. Your staging is up to you, right? You have to be in the TED branding, right? There's still guidelines, but how you utilize that is up to you. So here's the thing, is it is very difficult to put on a TEDx and maintain under the guidelines, make it integrity with everything else.
Mhm.
In the expert industry, there are events everywhere. Like there's live events, there's virtual events, almost everything's virtual now, but in like the real world, right, where there's live events, there's virtual events, there's all these things, there is like a free for all. You can do all the things, you go out, you test it, you see if it works, you come back, you adjust for your target market, you do all of these things, right? TEDx is not like that. You are not getting sponsored speakers. Speakers are not paid, right? No one is really paid. The budget gets allotted to your production costs. So that's your AV team, that is your venue, that's your food if you have to feed your people, right? That is all those things to make it happen. But you're not paying your speakers. You're not paying your team outside of like AV. Sometimes you have to hire people and that's fine.
Right.
But it's unlike any other event, right? And so that all falls onto the organizer. There's always a cost. There's a cost for the venue. There's a cost for your AV team. There's all of these costs. Now, you can get sponsors, right? My original venue was actually sponsoring me. So that was cool, right? You can talk to companies to see if they can sponsor part of the cost. All of that is possible. But all of this falls onto the organizer and the organizer's team. I have some extraordinary people who have been helping me put it together and all of that. The speakers have to fall within certain guidelines. So as an organizer, you may have coaches who are helping your speakers, but it is up to you to make sure whoever gets on your stage is within TED guidelines. Remember, the integrity of your stage is the most important thing, right? So if you have one speaker that goes rogue and is putting up like pseudoscience, that really brings down the integrity of your entire event, right? So there's a lot of detail. There's a lot of getting into it. There's a lot of like, you just have to pay attention to everything that happens. This is not one of those events that you can just show up and hope things go correctly. And if they don't, it's not the end of the world because you're going to do it again in like 3 months, right? Everything has to be very well planned out. And that all kind of falls into the organizer's responsibility, the cost for everything and all of that.
Wow, that's huge. I had no idea how intense that was. Now, Sarah, I've had Mel Robbins, who you mentioned earlier. She was a guest on my radio show, and she has almost 25 million views of that one talk that she gave. And then people like Simon Sinek, who he can't even count how many he has. What makes that? What's the differentiator between someone like Mel Robbins or Simon Sinek and the person who goes on and gets like 100 views or 1,500 views? Is there some kind of let's go to the magic. Is there some kind of magic there?
Yeah, there's total magic. And from my experience in working with various TEDx speakers, here's the thing. Number one, your talk title matters. So when you start looking at TEDx talks on YouTube, you'll notice the ones that start with like how to whatever, or like Simon Sinek, start with why, right? Well, that's intriguing. Like, oh, all right, I want to know more. Right? Some talk titles don't pull you in, right? So when someone's looking on YouTube, their attention span is not that long. Exactly. You don't have that long to like grab their attention. Your talk title matters. Now, here's another thing: as things go viral, someone sees a video, they like it, they pass it on, right? They repost it, they reshare it. Like social media is a thing, right? So here's the thing: is once you get someone past that talk title, what are you doing in that talk? And here's what it comes down to: is you have to be credible, right? And you have to be interesting. And you have to have an idea worth sharing that you can prove its validity. Okay, let's start with credibility. In a TED or TEDx talk, your story does not make up most of your talk. Your story is what makes you credible. Like, why are you talking about the thing you're talking about? And there have been TEDx talks where someone's gotten up on stage and they've had a really good mission. They've had a really good purpose in life. But despite how well it's presented, people are like, why? Like, why are you telling us about this? Why does this matter? Right? So your story and your background that got you from there to here matters, right? You set up your credibility, and this is not traditional credibility. When we talk about traditional credibility, we're talking about like college degrees and awards and book writing and like all of these things that may or may not show up in your TED Talk, but ultimately, why? Like, what was the thing that drove you here? And that is always your story. Your story gives you credibility. Next, like, you have to be interesting, right? And this is a combination of presentation skills, wording, like your ability on wordplay, and what you really have to say. There is a TED Talk out there where a guy spends like 5 minutes teaching you how to wash your hands with one paper towel. But I will tell you, it is fascinating. Like, I watched the entire thing and I was like, this guy's awesome, right? And he's teaching you how to dry your hands with one paper towel, right? It's not about the content, it's about you. Why in your credibility you should talk about it, and why should people want to listen to you, right?
Mhm.
And nothing is worse than a speaker when they get up on stage and they're monotone and you're like, oh my gosh, I really care about what you're saying, but not enough to finish listening to this talk. Like, just not that much. And so you want to be interesting, right? And then your idea we're sharing. Why does it matter and why does it make an impact? Are you truly making an impact on humanity? You know what I mean? Like that guy with the paper towel, it seems really superficial, but using one paper towel every time you wash your hands saves like all these trees, and it's like environmentally friendly, and there's a whole reason behind it, right? So even if the idea seems superficial, there has to be a reason it affects humanity. And if you get up on that TEDx stage and you have your credibility and you're interesting and there is not like consequences, you lose everybody then too. So you'll notice that the people who have the most views, the people who go viral, are the people that fall into these categories. The people who have that credibility, who show up interesting, their idea worth sharing matters, right? And so creating this TEDx talk takes a lot of thought. It takes a lot of scripting. It takes a lot of feedback. It takes a lot of, let me see the bigger picture of everything that's happening.
Outstanding. Now, Sarah, in the old days being like 20 years ago, someone would write a book, right? And then some publisher might pick it up, and then the publisher would do everything. They did the book tours, the speaking engagements, they booked the author on TV shows and all that kind of stuff. Now there's been this explosion of self-publishing. There's been the TEDx and the TED Talks, and the world changed, right? Now, how do you maneuver through all this massive confusion, for lack of a better word?
I'll say there's a lot of people in our circles who help people write books, become bestsellers, all of these things. And a book is always an amazing step to credibility. Like if you have that in you to write a book, you should do it. I'm a bestseller because I've written chapters, right? And I've contributed on books and all of these things. And I will tell you that I'm not a good writer at all. Like I do not claim that. Like I am a speaker and I am a verbal processor. And when I need to write something, it takes all of my energy and my brain power and my concentration. And I am not that great at it. But here's the thing, is if you can get your story out on paper and you can do that, I always suggest doing that. It supports your credibility, right? And that's the biggest thing. It will always support your credibility. And if it's a topic that you know well that you can write an entire book on, you've now written the book on it. Like, that's awesome. Do that, right? And there's very big differences now between Amazon bestseller and Wall Street Journal bestseller and USA Today bestseller. Like all of these lists are very different. And like anything else, I always suggest getting coached by someone, getting a mentor who knows the space, right? Don't go into this blind because like you said, how do you navigate it? I had someone who was helping me navigate through the book thing. I had someone help me navigate through the TEDx thing. I have someone help me navigate through literally anything I want to do. And that is how you do it. You find someone who specializes in that space, and then you let them coach you through it, no matter what. Because ultimately, the time you're going to spend trying to figure it out on your own is going to be so much longer than if you just find someone who specializes there. So yes, do a book. Helps your credibility. Find someone who can help you do that. That doesn't mean that you are an author and that is your career. It means that you have a book, right? And same thing with anything else. When you figure out your goal, right? Is your goal to get people into your program? Is your goal to become an influencer? What is your goal? And then move those steps through the fog that support your goal. So even though I tell everyone, go get a book, like if you don't want to be an author, like this is all you're doing is you're writing a book, right? Like that supports your goal. And that's really how you navigate. You figure out the steps that you need to get to your ultimate goal, and then you have to find people who can support you doing that. Back to, it's all about who you know.
Exactly. That's outstanding. So, Sarah, you talk a great deal about information marketing. All right. And again, for the novice out there who's looking at this, what is information marketing?
So information marketing in the expert industry is people who have target markets and they share their information and they coach. So like we just said, like book writers, like, right? People will teach you how to write and publish a book. Expert industry. There are life coaches, right? People are going to help you do whatever. I'm not specifically a life coach, right? I work more in marketing, but help you get your life back on track. Motivational coaches, right? There's business coaches, right? Who help you get your business in line. Ultimately, what it is people take their knowledge and their passion and they put it into a container to be able to teach people how to improve something in their life, right? So it's all about that transference of knowledge and then how to make people better at what they do. And everyone in the expert industry has a target market and something that they excel at. And so I always suggest that when you're looking for a coach for something in this info marketing space, what is your goal, right? Find someone who specializes in that. If your goal is to become like an influencer, you don't necessarily want a life coach. You want someone who specializes in social media, right? You want to become a best-selling author, you need someone who has experience in that, right? And you need to ask questions. And so that's really what this industry is. And that encompasses so many different areas and so many different target markets. But it's really the transference of knowledge from someone who is an expert in that section of knowledge to someone who needs that knowledge.
That is critical. That's the most important thing that I've heard and the viewers are going to hear, period, because so many of us have been approached by it's like hourly. You get a message or a LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever, right? And we're going to change your world. We know how to do this media thing. We know how to do the program, and most of them you fail miserably. You spend the money, it's terrible. You get frustrated, and now you're out the money, which you're never going to get back again. And so identifying those skill sets is critical, what you just said. If you want to be an influencer, how do you find an influencer? If you want to be an author, how do you find an author, correct? If you want to be a speaker, how do you find people in the speaking world?
Yeah, and that is absolutely correct. And I'll tell you that is like truth. I can't tell you how many Facebook messages I get, like, join this Facebook group, and I don't even respond. Like, I'm like, no, I'm not joining your group and I'm not responding to you. Why? Because it doesn't serve me. Like, you're not actually telling me how you can help me. You're just trying to build up your group numbers. Like, it does nothing for either of us, truthfully. If all you're trying to do is build up your group numbers, you are not serving your customers with excellence. You are not going out there making an impact. Like, those group numbers don't mean anything because of the Facebook algorithm, right? Like, there's so many things in this industry you really have to watch out for. And I will tell you that I have made a concerted effort to associate with people who are ethically and morally in alignment with my values. So I know that when I approach a client or when I'm approaching a speaker, right, what is a thing that is going to actually move them forward that is not totally self-serving, right? We're in business and you don't want to be a broke leader, but at the same time, if you're not serving your clients with excellence, what are you even doing? Like, it's bad practice.
Exactly.
And there's so many people out there who do that right now. And so it takes that a bit of energy to find the people who are actually the experts, the people who actually have the knowledge and can really move you forward in a positive way.
Exactly. I do some work with Jay Abraham, and one of the first things he said to me was, Frank, value is what you give to someone else. It's not what you expect in return. And that's exactly what you've laid out there for us. That value is something you have to provide. Incredible. Sarah, this has been amazing. We're near the end here. With all you've done and all that you've accomplished, what last words would you like to leave with all the listeners?
So the very last thing, and I say this almost every interview I do, is that you never actually know how your life is going to change. You never know what's actually in the future for you. You might be on one path and you might have one dream, and then suddenly you're on this whole different path. Here's the thing though, is you're not going to get anywhere unless you take that first step, right? Maybe you find something better on the way, but ultimately you take that first step and then the fog opens up and you take the second step and you continue to do it even if you can't see. You do it on faith, you have faith in the journey and you move forward. And that is the only way to really get to where you want to be in life and live your dream and go out in the world in a really big, meaningful way.
There's a book called The Passion Test by Atwoods. I can't remember the first, Janet, and I can't remember her husband's name. And in there, one of the things that they said that really resonated with me, Sarah, and you've just hit it all over the place today here, is what do you want to do? And stop getting lost in how am I going to do it? Decide what, start down the path. As you said, it's in the fog, like my books. Where's the rock so I can step on it? And the how will happen. Is that what you found?
Yeah, absolutely. Like never get stuck in that how. It just happens. And then you're like, oh, this is awesome. Like, how did I get here? And then you can trace back how you got there, right? But you don't know. You don't know how you're going to get anywhere. Like you just don't. And as much as you can plan it and as much as you can say, hey, like this is really my plan, at the end of the day, things change, right? So you choose what you want, you choose who you are and how you want to show up in the world, and then you figure everything else out as you go.
As it goes, exactly. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this has been one of the most interesting conversations we've had, period, in a long time. And we're just about out of time. I want to thank Sarah Lawrence for showing up and giving us all this insight, teaching us what TED is, what TEDx is, and how to find your way through the fog as she's went on. Now, ladies and gentlemen, no matter what life throws at you, please do three things. Look up, get up, never, ever give up. Pick up the pieces and start moving forward. And better times and better people are going to come into your life. If you'd like more information about Sarah, you can get it at her website or contact me, and I'll make sure I get it to her. Now, you can see this on ROKU TV, on my YouTube page, and it'll be sent to Sarah, and she'll put it on all of her locations. Now, let me leave you with this, ladies and gentlemen, as I do every week. None of us are in this alone. And the secret to walking on water is to know where the rocks are. And today, Sarah showed us where many of those rocks are. Join us again next week. We discuss another life-altering event. Thank you.
Thank you.